We all saw a man's life snuffed out. The promise of his life and the purpose of America that day was met with something fundamentally un-American, inhumane, and that cries out for justice. This morning, George Floyd's brother came before us at the site to speak to America. Passionate, pained, powerful, prayerful. He spoke to us about what happened to his brother. Terrence Floyd said that no one's grief could match his, and how blowing things up and acting out won't solve anything. We won't move the needle in the direction of justice and certainly won't bring his brother back. And his message echoes for all of us and to anyone who might hijack this moment and this movement to their own destructive ends. As he put it, let's do this another way. Let's stop thinking that our voices don't matter and vote, educate yourself. That's how we're going to hit him, he added, and finally said, and there's a lot of us. I spoke yesterday about the common ground that we found in the midst of our pain. The common ground that African Americans in this country share because of the devastating legacy of slavery and racism, but that every American must own and feel, and I believe we did and do. The good police officers, together with the good people, those who spoke out in a way I had never seen in the history of this country unequivocally, to call it murder, to say that it was wrong, and demand not just justice for George Floyd and his family, but for America in the days moving forward. The Floyd family knows the truth, that the cause of fairness, the drive for equality, the fight to end structural racism, the real reason so many are demonstrating right now on our streets, none of it is advanced by the violent acts of the few. Like you, I've been out there in the streets and I've seen with my eyes, whether it's on TV or on our blocks, that those of us who cry for justice have gone out and overwhelmingly and peacefully, if painfully, express the change that has to continue to come, just as we have in years before and decades before. And this city's evolution has written many of those pages of forward momentum, of a day when the police chief was more powerful than the mayor and couldn't be fired, and spoke about how black people had different veins and that's the reason why they were dying in chokeholds. That was where we were 30 years ago. But now, as we look at the progress we still need to make and the progress that we have made, it is with that spirit that George Floyd's brother gave us that we must move forward, with that mission not just in our hearts, but also in our actions. And I want to say clearly, we are going to continue to do everything we can to restore peace and to keep this city safe. We're throwing everything we have at maintaining the peace. And we're going to throw everything we have on promoting justice, and nobody out there need pick between those two. A curfew will again be in place tonight in our city and our county. It starts, I know it's a little confusing for some, at different times in different parts of the county, but here in the city of Los Angeles, in conjunction with the county-wide one, it begins at 6 p.m. You may have received a different alert from your phone, and that might have been sent from a different city when you're in the city of LA. But our curfew requires that people within the city of Los Angeles stay indoors from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. And there's a curfew in effect across Los Angeles County. This is not a step that anybody takes lightly, but it is done for all of our safety. It's done to protect protesters. It's done to protect families. It's done to protect businesses and workers. And you know what? Most of us fit into many of those categories. So please stay indoors and please stay safe and obey the law. You need to go home. For days, we have witnessed demonstrations in over 140 American cities, including ours. And protests are part of a proud tradition of change in this country. We've seen this in Los Angeles in years past to promote the rights of immigrants, of women, of African Americans, to stand up for science and our environment, to do the things that do move our country forward. And if we didn't have those voices or lived in an unfree country, we could not have seen the progress we have made. And I will always put in this work. I told you during the COVID-19 crisis that I and your city government would never stop working for you. And we're not today either. Not just to work for you, but to work to end racism, to address poverty, to make sure that inequality in our city is not a model in this country, but that we erase those things that can divide us and find the ways forward. You've been there alongside, supporting things we've done from raising the minimum wage to making community college free, to making sure that we have independent investigations of police shootings, to train our officers and folks who have served time together, to spend time together mentoring our young people in this city. And there is no question we are not at the peak yet, but we are not at the base of the mountain either. And we have to continue to find the peace in our city that will allow us to take the next step up the mountaintop. Our city has to be clear, though, because we too have been too hard hit in decades past of when violence and looting and the destruction of ourselves happens, it sets us back for years. After the peaceful protests end, when looting and vandalism begins, we have seen this too often. Here across the country, in our neighboring cities here in the Southland, and our city and our police department will continue to do the work with our partners to make sure we have a city at peace. Our police department will defend this city from the crimes being committed by those who seek to exploit this moment. Arrests are being made every single day as we speak for anybody who breaks the law, and anybody thinking that it's getting easier out there or that they can get away with it, you're wrong. And I would say to you, don't be dumb. Don't make a mistake that lasts much more than today, but that can stay with you for months and years in your life. Don't do it. We will not stand for violence, for looting, for arson, not today, not ever, no exceptions. Not only because it's wrong, not only because our businesses are barely starting to stand up and those workers that work there need to get a paycheck, but we also know the danger to human lives. And thank God that so far we've not seen in this city the loss of life, but we've come close already. And that can happen to innocent people on the streets. It can happen to our peace officers, and we have to protect life. If, as we've shown in our fight against COVID-19, every life is sacred, let's prove that right now. And we are here as a city to preserve life. Small businesses were hurting long before any looting and vandalism visited them. Employees at these businesses were counting on conditions improving. These businesses are the bedrock of our neighborhoods, our main streets, of building community wealth that doesn't just go into corporate hands, but into local hands, in communities of color, in low-income communities, with immigrant-run businesses, and those businesses that have been in families for a generation or more. They were reeling, they are reeling from the effects of the COVID-19 crisis. Many of the more than 100 of the 120 businesses impacted by the destruction of the last few nights had just brought back their employees and opened their doors to customers for the first time in months. They were beginning to drum up the sales they needed to see a future, to survive. And now they have to contend with property damage, lost inventory. But I want to say that we are here to help, even in these tough moments. The Los Angeles Department of Building and Safety has been conducting safety assessments of buildings to anyone who requests one at no cost. Some damaged buildings may need only to repair glass, and they get a yellow ticket, and that means as soon as it's repaired, you're good to go. And there will be no permits required for those repairs. Others, a much smaller number, have fire damage, and they need a permit when making more extensive repairs. And the Department of Building and Safety will make sure that any plans that are submitted to repair damaged buildings are assigned to a plan checker on that same day and given priority processing. If you're one of those businesses and you don't know where to go, please go to Build LA. demolition.lacity.org, and we are here to get you back on your feet. Additionally, we will be waiving the certified construction and demolition hauler requirement, so businesses don't have to pay to have debris removed. Our sanitation department will be providing roll-off and dumpster services to help clear out debris quickly. Many of you saw and thanked those city workers that were out there the next morning downtown in the Fairfax area to provide a seamless and no-cost demolition process so small businesses can rebuild faster. And finally, in the coming days, I'll be proposing to the City Council additional financial assistance directly to businesses so that you can bring your employees back, get your stock back, and get back to business. We need to bring our economy back for our businesses, for our workers, for our neighborhoods, for us all. In addition to helping businesses recover, we will support every resident in this city. While many Angelenos wore masks this weekend, I encourage everybody going out to a protest, wear a mask, keep your social distance, and please get a free COVID-19 test. These are available for everybody who's been out there. Coronavirus.lacity.org/testing is our site. And the city and county have now provided more than 500,000 free tests with or without symptoms. But if you've been out there, you may be at higher risk, so please sign up. And our largest testing center, Dodger Stadium, will be open again tomorrow with thousands of tests, as well as the walk-up location at the Kedron Community Health Center in South Los Angeles. Other sites will remain closed. This is because our testing operation is led and run by volunteers. Those volunteers have not yet signed up to come back, given what's happening in the city. But thanks to the fire department and volunteers from our city staff, we will continue making sure that most of the capacity of those centers will be met at Dodger Stadium and in South LA. We know there are more protests today, and my hope is that they will continue to be peaceful and powerful from beginning to end. And I know the worst things sometimes get on the news, but I saw beautiful images too, of engagement and of restraint, of the ability to exercise our pain and our anger, of police officers who took a knee with protesters, of folks who gave hugs to our National Guard and others. We need to find each other even amidst our pain, and I believe, again, that common ground is something that we hold together. That everybody in uniform and with a badge knows that what happened in Minneapolis is wrong and is committed to not only pushing for justice there, but being part of a coalition of justice here. But for those who are acting criminally, destroying property and stealing, we see you and the police will arrest you. Those who are peacefully protesting, we see you and thank you. The city is stronger because of you. With that, let me turn it over to our Police Chief, Michael Moore, to give an update on what has happened here today, and then we'll hear from Chief Terrazas, and after that, we'll take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as to a status check today, where we're at, as for the safety of Los Angeles, last night we saw the full impact of the curfew with our ability to police areas of downtown and particularly and also the west side, but also the valley, where we saw roving groups of individuals that were not compliant with the curfew, and we believe were out to loot and prey upon businesses and in our community. And our officers' actions were able to to identify those individuals and make a number of arrests. Last night, just under 700 arrests. And within those 700 arrests were 70 individuals who were either burglarizing or looting, victimizing businesses further. So what that tells me is that two things. We didn't have protests last night. We had criminal acts. We didn't have people mourning the death of this man, George Floyd. We had people capitalizing. His death is on their hands, as much as it is those officers. And that is a strong statement. But I must say that this civil unrest that we're in the midst of, we must turn a corner from people who are involved in violence, people who are involved in preying upon others. The actions last night, I am encouraged for Los Angeles, but I was discouraged for Santa Monica and Long Beach. This morning was a bright morning. It started well. A protest in the Van Nuys area with a group of students that was largely peaceful. Then through the course of that protest, others came involved and looted, attempted and broke in 3 stores. Officers were on scene, made arrests. But again, a protest that we are efforting to support and ensure that people's voices are heard. Social justice that needs to occur, that we can't hear because of the violence. As we move through the evening and presently late afternoon, we have a series of unpermitted, some planned marches and groups in various parts of the city. I'm aware of the one on the west side, where at the federal building, it moves onto the freeway. When you move onto the freeway, you jeopardize not only yourselves, but the lives of so many others. And as they're back on the streets, we will be interacting with that crowd, that protest, and that protest is now unlawful. The actions of endangering others creates an unsafe circumstance that just doesn't be simply turned on or off. In Hollywood, we have 3 groups in various parts of Hollywood that are protesting, and largely peaceful. It's my hope that they'll continue. But if they do not, we have ample resources around and about them, monitoring them, and that we will act. Lastly, we had a protest that started here at our headquarters, our police headquarters, and then moved to City Hall. Unfortunately, I was actually at a press conference with our law enforcement leaders, which I'll speak to in a moment, and was unable to be there because I understand they asked for me and they wanted to speak with me. And I wish I could have been there. As soon as I left that press conference, I went there to meet with that group. Unfortunately, they had left and they had moved over to a different location. But I met with the leadership from LAPD that was there. And what they told me was that the group, recognizing that I wasn't available, asked for that leadership would take a knee with them, not to them. And nor were we asking them to take a knee to us. But we saw each other. We had a moment, as I understand it, of communication, of recognizing. I saw that and I've referenced it last Saturday on Beverly after a terrible aftermath of fire and destruction. But the group that wasn't necessarily the largest group, not involved with that, just wanted to be heard. And they wanted to hear that we were willing to do that. And once that happened, that march remained peaceful and we were able to leave. Tonight, as we approach the curfew, it is important that these protest groups end. That their actions, their words that we hear, not be drowned out now by not attending to the curfew. As we move into the evening, we have ample resources to not just protect our critical sites and protect our businesses and retail throughout the city, but also to ensure that those individuals who remain on our streets to prey upon our communities will be held accountable. I joined the law enforcement leaders of LA County today, by DA Lacey as well as City Attorney Fuhrer. And all of us are committed to hearing, recognizing, and acknowledging the failures of our past. But as we move forward, we must assure every member of our public of our unbending efforts to ensure your safety. The presence of the National Guard, the Safer at Home Directive, and now the curfew, and the mobilization of LAPD is our control factions to restore that. But I'll last close with what my remarks were this morning in another media engagement. And that is to these organizers, is for them to join with us in calling for peace and showing the volume of their power to be that agent that restores peace in our community, not by policing power, but by their power of talking to the community, those advocacy, those groups of needing social justice, of let's achieve that through peace. Tonight, as I close, I wish us a safe night And I thank the men and women of LAPD and LA Fire and all of our first responders for their sacrifice, their dedication, their valor. I was able, and I'll announce, to meet with and see the release of a young officer whose skull was fractured Saturday night during one of these protests that turned violent. After metal plates and stitches and staples, by the grace of God and the power of surgery and medicine, he was able to survive those injuries and is now resting safely at home. I'm thankful for his survival. I am grateful for his service, as I am to every member of this of LAPD. Thank you.
Chief Terrasses.
Thank you, Mayor. The men and women of the Los Angeles City Fire Department continue to protect the lives and property of the people of Los Angeles. We've been able to respond to hundreds of fire and medical calls in the protest areas in the past 4 days, while simultaneously responding to our daily average of 1,400 emergencies throughout the city. We've also sent firefighters to our fire service partners in the cities of Beverly Hills and Santa Monica who faced civil unrest this past weekend, and we're prepared to continue that support as needed. And we have done so without incurring any firefighter injuries. Our firefighters also continue to support the city's only active drive-through COVID testing site at Dodger Stadium, for which we have raised the capacity to 7,700 people per day. You can schedule an appointment for testing at coronavirus.lacity.org/testing. As I said yesterday, it is critical that our firefighters and paramedics are able to respond to emergencies to do their jobs without interference from protesting crowds. We respect the right to protest peacefully, but I ask you to make the right choice. When a fire engine or ambulance is trying to get to the scene of an emergency, to answer the call for help. Seconds count when a person has a heart attack or their home or business is engulfed with flames. Any delay of our firefighters can truly result in a life or death situation. The LAFD remains ready to protect the people of Los Angeles, and I ask everybody to abide by the 6 p.m. curfew that has been set for the city of Los Angeles, so we can continue to do the very important job of keeping Los Angeles safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiefs. As we know, we're fighting more than one battle right now, one for justice and for peace in our city, but also the other with our ongoing struggle against the COVID-19 crisis, which even in these hard times does not let up. For 2 minutes, let me update you on that. Today we saw, I think as some may know, but many may have lost, the number of new cases went up under about 1,000, 978 today, a 1.8% increase. And deaths, we had 22 more announced to reach a total of 2,384 fallen from COVID-19. I also want to confirm that now we have 3,510 beds available, of which nearly 3,000 are occupied with more than 3,000 people who are experiencing homelessness to have shelter in this emergency. And we have 331 isolation rooms as well. We also have sufficient hospital beds, over 1,216 ventilators available, and the 100,000 N95 masks that came here that we are sharing with our hospitals at cost are now in our warehouse. We've administered nearly 500,000 tests, as I mentioned, spent nearly $50 million to date on these tests. And we have been doing that both at the testing centers as well as on Skid Row and with people experiencing homelessness, and in now all of our senior skilled nursing facilities. Finally, we've handed out nearly $20 million in cash assistance through Angelino cards. We've also had business ambassadors who are working hard and through what we saw, the unrest, to be able to help businesses reopen at thousands, now over 2,800 different businesses, and served more than 1 million meals to seniors. We also have awarded microloans to our businesses now at $1.9 million, and we'll continue to push forward with those. I hope later in the week to share with you too in this moment, not only how we are addressing COVID-19, but to address some of the underlying calls for justice and for investments that are ongoing in our communities. Happy to answer questions about COVID-19 as well as, of course, what's at hand. But I thank you all for the work you will do to be safe tonight, to abide by the curfew, to stay at home also when you're allowed to be out whenever possible, and to move forward. With that, be happy now to answer questions.
Thank you. Our first question will come from the line of Claudia Pesciuta with KNX
And before Claudia
Radio.
starts, Claudia, hold on 2 seconds.
I'd like to get an idea of how many protesters have been heard. I know all of them may not have sought treatment, but at least how many have been checked out by paramedics and are taken to the hospital. And then, Eric, you say you're throwing everything to have at promoting peace, but critics, including Councilman Marquise Harris Dawson, argue that bringing in the National Guard makes some people fear that they'll be subject to even more violence. Can you respond to those concerns? Thank you.
Sure. I would share concerns too. We didn't have peacemakers, and I know that for sure it evoked things for people who have looked back, and 50 years ago the National Guard had incidents that were a stain on the country, and of course in 1992 it evoked all sorts of memories. I want to be very clear, the National Guard, as I said, I saw folks yesterday who were protesters hugging spontaneously our National Guard that was here at City Hall. These are everyday citizens right here in Southern California and throughout the state who mobilize from their normal jobs in offices and in, manufacturing facilities, everywhere else in this state to help protect their state. And so it is very, very good to have them because they can act, especially in those places where businesses can be further looted or may be attacked, to protect those areas. In stationary places, we saw them as well help secure after the looting that happened in Santa Monica, which is not our city, but we had mutual aid and we're able to help get some National Guardsmen and women there. And so we are very glad that they are here and respect that, which is why part of the reason, first of all, there isn't violence in South Los Angeles. And secondly, we said they would not be there because of the memories of 1992. So we're glad that they are there. I also know the chief wants to clarify one thing that he said before the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I walked back to my spot, I reflected on a remark I made in characterizing the death at the hands of Minneapolis police officers of George Floyd. And his death a week ago, and looking at the video that I've seen and every law enforcement professional that I know, was at the hands of a police officer and officers who stood by, entirely inconsistent with our values, our reverence for life, our profession, and what we try to do. We have to deal with conflict. We have to deal with taking people into custody. And the outcomes of those can be uncertain, but it has to be right. And what I saw there wasn't right. And his death, a week later, has served as a catalyst for a number of events, certainly protests, but some are using it as a catalyst to justify violence. And so I misspoke when I said his blood is on their hands, but certainly their actions do not serve the enormity of his loss and cannot be in his memory. Looting a store, burning a building, attacking a police officer, nearly killing one, but across this country, seeing the death and the destruction cannot bring honor. It's not done in an honorable way. The reforms, the justice that needs to be achieved, what his name should stand for is the catalyst for change. And I would ask everyone, every group, every organization, that as they bring voice to that needed change, that we join with you. And so I regret the remarks of that characterization, but I don't regret, and nor will I, apologize to those who are out there today committing violence, destroying lives and livelihoods, and creating this destruction. His memory deserves reform. His memory deserves a better Los Angeles, a better United States, and a better world. It is my hopes and every pure intention to achieve just that. And I thank you.
Thanks, Chief. We'll take the next question.
That comes from James Allen with Random Length News.
Hey, James.
Hi, good afternoon, Mayor. I wish we were meeting under better circumstances.
Me too.
I have a couple questions. First is about actually directed to the chief regarding the recent multiple attacks nationwide on journalists who are covering these protests. And I do realize that the majority of those have not taken place anywhere in Southern California. And number two, the question really is in places like Camden, New Jersey, and in Portland, Oregon, the police have actually stood with the demonstrators at the beginning of the march or even marched with them in solidarity because of the same kind of positions that you and Chief Moore have enunciated and stood for. Why is it that you and the rest of the LAPD are not marching with the demonstrators?
So I'll let the chief answer because both the questions were for him, but I hope that we did hear, and I know it's tough sometimes with the streaming, about the way that officers have kneeled alongside, have embraced, have had the conversations. You know, there was no march after the rally at Fairfax, but the way this chief went behind lines, because there should not be a line between police and community, to have those conversations. Again, I know those don't always make the headlines, but I know that they happen. I'm proud of that leadership. We need to multiply that as many times as possible, and your help with the images to let people know that is the story. The peaceful protesters should be the story, not looters. The conversations and common ground should be the story, nothing else. But let's have the chief answer both of those questions, and appreciate you, James.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. We stand ready to walk with any organized group for a peaceful demonstration, to join with them in any assembly. We joined prior to the COVID pandemic. We had engagements with communities all throughout Los Angeles. I look forward to the day of us getting back to that. But there is absolutely no hesitation for us to join, whether it be City Hall steps, it be any portion of this city. We would welcome the opportunity. Second, mere invitation. What we won't do is we won't impose ourselves. I won't insist that someone have us there. There are tensions here in the sense of some people's nerves are raw and they're hurt, and the last thing they want to do is stand alongside a police officer, or a man in uniform, or a woman in uniform, as they're expressing their grievances. And I respect that. Secondly, regarding the attacks on journalists, I'm happy on the aspect of in Los Angeles, we're not seeing that. We've had great relationships with our journalists, our media, and I see, and I've seen them at work reporting and being transparent about the facts and circumstances of these demonstrations, and I look for that to continue.
So that's the last question. And so let me say a few things in Spanish. All right, okay. Thank you again, everybody, and I'll say some words in Spanish as well. Gracias a las jefes de policía y de los bomberos, Michael Moore y también Ralph Terrazas, por su presencia hoy conmigo. Y mis vecinos angelinos. Hace una semana hoy que falleció George Floyd bajo la rodilla de un policía en Minneapolis. Y esta mañana, en el mismo lugar donde lo mataron, su hermano compartió unas palabras